What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing Halloween encounters with the Black Eyed Kids. Welcome to the 7 Nights of Halloween, which is something I try my very best to do annually around this time of year, though I'll admit that this time I wasn't really sure if I should do it or not, yet here we are. As it seems I couldn't help myself. I didn't really know where to start this year, as I've covered so much terrifying stuff in the last couple of years, just generally, and then on the 7 Nights of Halloween as well. This year's 7 Nights is going to be a little different, as I've chosen a wide array of the usual topics to discuss. Only this week, the videos are one right after another, one a day for 7 days, culminating to the end on Halloween. With that being said, I saw no better place to start than with my favorite topic, and seemingly one of your favorites too, the Black Eyed Kids. By the way, don't forget about my 2 books on this subject, and I'll talk more about those and how you can get them, signed copies and otherwise, at the end of this video. However, and for now, let's just get started and jump right in to Halloween encounters with the Black Eyed Kids. I won't go into what the BEK are or really anything about them here in this video, as I need to keep these ones a little shorter than usual so that I can get through all of the researching, scripting, editing, and uploading of all 7 videos to get them out on time. It's a harrowing process for just one person, so if you have no idea at all what the Black Eyed Kids are, then I suggest you go and watch one of my many videos or read one of my 2 books on the subject, but you don't have to do that before watching or listening to this video, because these are just encounters, and within just a few minutes, even if you have absolutely zero knowledge as to what these things are, it won't matter, and you'll be just as terrified, if not more so, than those of us who know all about them. Let's start with Reddit user Halloween Warning, who said that his encounter took place in Portland, Oregon, and it started when he noticed that his neighbor hadn't yet hung the Halloween decorations he was known for putting out each year during the holiday season. Our witness was joking with his neighbor and mentioned that if he wanted to have his decorations up in time for trick-or-treaters, then he needed to get a move on right away and put them out. However, he was shocked when his neighbor not only didn't laugh, but told him that he was actually not putting decorations out that year and that he wasn't even handing out candy. He was keeping his house completely dark. He would be leaving his house dark for the first time since he had moved in years before. When pressed a little further about why he would do such a thing, he reluctantly told our witness a scary story that happened to him the year before on Halloween night. Some kids had knocked on his door late at night, and despite the late hour, he took his bucket of candy and went to the door. He didn't ask who it was or anything because he just assumed it was some kids late trick-or-treating. He was surprised when he got to the door, though, because the 2 kids standing there weren't wearing any sort of costume that he could recognize, and it looked like they were just wearing normal clothes, though admittedly the clothing looked a little bit shabby for the area that they were in. Their eyes were as black as obsidian stone. He noticed it right away, and he was immediately struck with regret at having opened the door in the first place, but he was so terrified that he was frozen and unable to do anything about it, like back away and close the door. The Reddit poster said, quote, "He said one was probably around 13 to 14 and the other around 16 to 17, both boys. They weren't dressed up, but he remembers the older one was wearing a flannel checkered shirt. He was immediately overcome with uneasiness, like opening the door was a huge mistake. They just stared at him, and he noticed they had really big irises and dilated pupils. He couldn't even see the whites of their eyes, so he figured they were contact lenses. He was frozen there holding the candy bowl, like he couldn't slam the door in their face as much as he wanted to. So he nervously tried to smile at them, hoping they would break character and ask for candy or say trick or treat or something. The younger one said they had gotten lost and needed to come in and use his phone. That was when he closed the door more than halfway on them and said, 'No, sorry.' And the older one said something like, 'Can we just wait in your house until our parents come and get us?' But by then, he was convinced that his life was in danger and these kids must be high on something or intending to rob him. So he just kept mumbling, 'No, sorry, good night,' as he inched the door, closed, and locked it. He told me he was so effing scared at that point that they were going to break in through one of his windows or something, but he looked through the peephole and they had turned to leave. He watched TV really low so that he could hear any sounds at all, and he said he stayed up until like 5 a.m. because he was too scared to go to bed and too scared to drop his guard. The whole time he's telling me this, I'm thinking, my God, this sounds so familiar. Just like the Black Eyed Kids urban legend. Then I thought, hey, maybe this dude is trying to scare me because after all, he normally does have the Halloween spirit. So I'm looking at him incredulously, but trying not to seem too gullible. So I'm like, man, that is really crazy. Sounds like the Black-Eyed Kids. He just looks at me blankly. What, is that a movie or something? And I said no, but I told him to go and look it up online. Like an hour later, I get a knock on my door and admittedly almost jump out of my skin thinking it's a demon child. It was my neighbor and his eyes were freaking huge. He swears to me up and down that he had never heard of the BEKs before, and it's so similar to what happened to him. So we talked a while longer, and I told him that quite a few people probably know about that urban legend, and it's possible it was just teenagers with black scleral contacts trying to freak people out on Halloween night. Which would be genius, by the way. But he said the fear he felt was so primal and came over him the second he opened the door for them. Anyway, guys, beware, I guess. Halloween would definitely be the perfect cover for them. End quote. So think about this for a minute, guys, and I've said this many times. Halloween is the perfect cover for all sorts of supernatural beings, and it's one for the Black-Eyed Kids in particular because to the untrained eye, and until it's too late, they look like normal kids, mostly just walking around trick-or-treating. If you saw one, you might think maybe they walked and spoke a little oddly, but other than that, provided you don't see their eyes, you wouldn't think too much about it and could even think that perhaps they're just staying in character of whatever it is they're dressed as. I want to say, too, that the reference of or him referring to the BEK phenomenon as urban legend over and over again got really annoying and really old real fast because as I talk about in my book, Danger at Your Door, Encounters with Black-Eyed Kids, it is so much more than that. You can't just call something an urban legend because you feel like it might be one. While it's becoming more common for people who know about the BEK to receive visits almost as if they drew the entities to them with their thoughts or something, it's still not uncommon for them to visit people on a seemingly random basis as well. And because I have finally drew the conclusion that the invitation into the home isn't really the point for them, but the terror and fear the person at the other end of the door feels when encountering these bizarre and terrifying entities is the point. They could even go to more than one house in a night, provided there's no rhyme or reason to their madness or who they visit, but that's still up for debate and something I teeter back and forth about. Is it purposeful, their choosing of their victims? And make no mistake, too, the people who encounter these beings are victims. Let's move on. Our next encounter also comes from Reddit, and it's also a case I've discussed a few times already, kind of vaguely, but I thought it would be worth telling the whole story straight from the poster's mouth, so to speak. The poster's name is SarahBeth11, and this is yet another case where the woman said she hadn't ever heard of the BEK phenomenon before. This Halloween in question, according to her, was much slower than it ever had been in the many years before she'd lived there. At around 10 that evening, she took her dog Chloe for a walk while her husband stayed at the house and took a shower. Before she could go outside with the dog, she heard a knock at the front door. She immediately thought that this was odd because the doorbell glowed in the dark and therefore was impossible to miss, so why was whoever was out there knocking? She started to walk to the door thinking it was just some late trick-or-treaters, but she noticed her dog was no longer excitedly waiting for its leash to be put on to go for a walk and was instead cowering in a corner, which in and of itself was highly unusual and very much out of character for the pet. When our witness looked over at the door, she saw the silhouettes of two young kids, and when she looked out to see their costumes, she saw they were dressed in normal, everyday clothing. She also thought it was a bit late for children their age to be out at night by themselves, even if it was Halloween. The little girl was 12 years old at most, and the younger child with her, a little boy, couldn't have been any older than the age of 8 or 9. She explained what happened next and said, quote, "The girl very politely spoke up. 'Ma'am, can we please come inside and use your phone to call our mom?' As she spoke, something in the pit of my stomach was telling me something was very wrong. What kid, even at that age, doesn't have their own cell phone nowadays? I couldn't remember the last time I'd had anybody ask to use my home phone. Hun, don't you have a phone of your own you can call your mom on?" I asked. This was when things got really weird. Both kids turned to look at one another like they were going to say something to one another, but neither ever spoke. They both turned back to me and the girl said, "Ma'am, my cell phone battery doesn't have much charge left in it. Can we please come inside and call our mother? We're alone out here and my brother is scared." I have to admit there were two competing feelings going on inside of me. The first, that of a mother's heart that wanted to help these two small children get to their mom. the other a sinking fear in my gut that was keeping the other feeling at bay. It was then I noticed that during the short conversation, I'd already opened the door a few extra inches, which I was completely unaware I had done. I stopped. Honey, why don't you give me your mother's number and I can call her myself? Another pause, and again they looked at one another. After a short moment, they turned back to me and the girl said, Ma'am, my little brother has to use your bathroom. Can we please come inside while you call our mom? And with that last statement, the little girl moved closer to the door like she was going to just walk on in by me. As she did, she stepped into the light coming from inside the house, and I got my first real good look at her. Solid jet black eyes. That's all I could see. The motherly instinct was gone and replaced by terror I don't think I've ever felt before in my life. I could feel every hair on my arms and back of my neck standing at attention. I closed the door to where my face was just able to stick out. The little girl stopped and again pleaded, Please, ma'am, we're really scared and alone out here. We have to come inside. Please help us. Then, like on cue, both kids began to whimper and cry. That's when the fear overtook me and I shut and locked the door. I'll call your mom if you give me the number, I shouted through the door, but I'm not letting you in my house. I could still see them standing there on the porch, just staring at me through the beveled glass pane. Part of me wanted to run upstairs to my husband, but the bigger part didn't want to lose track of where these kids were. That would have freaked me out even more to not know where they were. After what seemed like forever, but probably was only a few seconds, I decided I'd call my neighbor that lives across the street. As I made my way to the side table by our couch to my phone, I glanced at the back door. Chloe was nowhere to be found. We later found her in the guest room, hidden under a bed. When I got to my phone and started to look for this contact info, it was only then that the kids stepped away from the door and began to walk to the street. As they did, I walked to the door to get a better look to see where they went, still not calling my neighbor. If you get close enough to the glass, you can see out enough to make out people's shapes, but you can't see much detail. Of course, standing that close to the door would make you pretty obvious to anyone outside looking in. From the door, I could see that the kids were still standing under the street lamp nearest to my house, staring back at me. As I lifted my phone to my ear after calling, only then did the kids start to walk down our street. I met my neighbor out under the lamp once he was out there, but the kids were nowhere to be seen. End quote. Seems to me like this is just another bizarre example of these beings using Halloween as the perfect cover for whatever their bizarre and terrifying intentions are. Reddit user Bloody Bones said that their encounter happened on the night before Halloween, and on that evening he was walking down to the corner store, which was something he did all the time. He said the store was about 3 blocks away, and there was nothing odd or bizarre about walking there or the walk itself, and that it was boring at best. I'll let him explain it. Quote, during my walk, I see the normal, the occasional person putting up Halloween decorations and kids playing in their yards, but this story is about something far more sinister. I remember seeing 2 teens about age 14 knocking on a door asking to use the phone, which of course I thought was weird because most teenagers these days have their own phones. As I kept walking, they stopped and stared at me for a short moment. I felt the blood in my veins chill. I felt so creeped out, I hurried to the next block. The next block seemed fine until I looked behind me and saw the 2 teens were following me. I took off sprinting to the store at that point. I saw the sign for the store and relief washed over me. I opened the door and I told the cashier about what had happened on the way there. He looked at me slightly creeped out and told me a story about this happening to him in his hometown and how they found him the day he left and asked for his help in an emotionless voice. He told me never to agree to help. He told me another story, but at that point I was no longer paying attention because they were standing at the door asking to be let in. The cashier freaked out and locked the door. The teens never seemed to waver or leave. They wouldn't step away from the door. It had been an hour at this point. The cashier and I were ready to fight our way out, but instead he took me out the back. The one teen came around the back just as the door shut behind us. "Can you help me?" is all he could say. He was closing in on us. And his eyes. They were as black as a starless night. They were peering right into my soul. I couldn't help but gaze into his eyes. The terror. I can't remember too much of what happened next, but I do recall the sounds of struggle. When I came to, the cashier was struggling with both teens. He was calling out to me for help. I ran towards them, grabbed him by his collar, and pulled him between the 2, knocking them over in the process. I didn't look back until I was near my house. The cashier was gone, but the teens were still following behind. I ran into my house, closed all the blinds, and turned the music up. I got lucky that day, but I'm not sure how long I can keep out of their grasp. I tried to find and thank the cashier for saving my life that day, but he didn't show up to work after that. I asked his boss, and he told me he had called over the phone to quit. He said he was moving. To this very day, I sometimes feel the fear of those eyes watching me as I drive to work. I sometimes will look out my window and swear I see them watching my house from a couple of blocks away, waiting for their next chance to get me." End quote. Now, I've recently been taking some hits in the comments about using Reddit for some of the encounters I bring to you here on this channel, but just know that I know that sometimes the stories are over-exaggerated or just plain untrue. However, I don't tend to discount anyone's alleged experiences due to the hostility I've encountered so many times with everything I've experienced and been through in my life all throughout it, right? Plus, this is a video for my series, The 7 Days of Halloween, and I wanted this series to be a little bit more about the spook factor for once, and not so serious as we are all the time. So I know that that story is probably over-exaggerated or plain untrue, but it was still fun and still creepy. Our last encounter happened on a day in the week leading up to Halloween holiday and starts with our witness noticing her dog, Lucy, incessantly barking. She had been asleep and the barking woke her up. At first, she didn't really think much about it, but once it had been several minutes with the dog showing no signs of calming down, the woman went to the front door, which was seemingly the focus of the dog's attention, and her goal was to show the terrified and fearful dog that nothing was out there in the hopes that Lucy would just understand what she was doing as though she were a child who could be pacified, but that isn't what happened at all. As soon as our witness touched the deadbolt and before she could unlock it, Lucy leapt through the air, lunging at her as though she were going to attack, before running away whimpering to go and cower in a corner somewhere out of sight. Our witness was shocked and fearful because her dog had never behaved that way before, but even more than that, she was suddenly struck with an instinctual and almost primal sense of terror. It was crushing, and her fear overtook her to the point where her heart was racing so quickly. She thought that it would soon beat right out of her chest. She explained what happened next by saying, quote, "I looked through the peephole. I can't explain why I looked, but I did. Outside were two kids. One was just a smidgen shorter than me and didn't look much younger. I'm 21, and she looked to be about 16 or 17. She was slender and pale. Her hair was a light shade of honey blonde, and she wore it long, about mid-back, with long, thin, blunt bangs in the front that covered most of her eyes. She wore jeans, a light wash that's popular right now, and a thin-looking olive-covered pullover-style hoodie. She held the hand of a small girl who looked to be around 3 or 4 in the same style of jeans and a button-down ivory cardigan. The smaller one looked at the floor shyly, but had that same shade of hair tied back in a ponytail. She held a stuffed toy under her free arm, and it was identical to one my daughter has, as was her style of dress. Had it not been for the feeling of overwhelming dread and fear, I probably would have asked these children in and gave them some tea or hot chocolate to get them out of the bitter cold. Something about them seemed off. At this point, I hadn't made any noise. I hadn't shushed the dog or grumbled, nothing. I hadn't turned on any lights. These kids had no indicators that I was at the door. The older one spoke. She had a voice that was mature, confident, strong, and accentless. She held her head tilted downward, and I couldn't see her eyes. She said, "We have to use your phone." I stood, frozen in fear. How did she even know I was there? She raised her head to face me directly, and that's when I saw her eyes. There was a reason I couldn't see them through her bangs before. They were black or midnight blue or a dark, dark purple. They were otherworldly. She said, "Our mother is worried." As someone who has always been interested in creepy stories, I knew what she was the second she looked at me through the door. I have never been one to believe in these things. As a staunch atheist and skeptic when it comes to the paranormal, I had written off many a ghost story from friends and family members eager to tell their tale. I still didn't believe it. Still, I couldn't rationalize my way out of this. I was standing with nothing but a thin wooden door between me and black-eyed kids. There was no questioning what was right in front of me. I did not answer her. Slowly and silently, I backed away from the door, Lucy still cowering at my ankles. She kept talking. "Just let us in to use your phone." I took another step back, and with that step, the tone changed. At first, she seemed polite. When I took that second step back, she became commanding, almost hostile. "We're not going to hurt you. If we wanted to do that, we would have broken in. So I'll ask again. May we come in and use your phone?" Lucy snarled at the door, and I inched backward, though something inside of me seemed to be slowly pulling me back toward the door. It wasn't a physical pulling so much as a subconscious need to get back to the door and to let them in. I got to my room, covered up the window, locked the door, and sat there in the dim light of the night light. I heard her call me back to the door once more and then quiet. I didn't go back to sleep that night and I haven't slept right since. I know from reading about them that BEKs can't just come in without permission. I know they haven't hurt anyone, as far as we know, but still I fear I'll be the exception. When I told my husband, he said it was just a dream. He keeps telling me to forget it, but this lingering feeling of sadness, this dread when the house is silent at night, this fear of a knock at the door, that tells me otherwise. End quote. So what the black-eyed kids are, where they're from, what their intentions are, that's all something that's been discussed at length by so many people across the internet. I wrote 2 whole books on the subject, with one being Danger at Your Door, Encounters with Black-Eyed Kids, and that book contains a ton of research, some facts, as well as encounters with these terrifying entities. The second was a companion book called Midnight Visitors, which I went and wrote due to you guys wanting so many more encounter stories and showing such an interest in them. Let me know what you all think in the comments, because these videos for the 7 nights of Halloween are meant to be short, sweet, to the point, and fun. As I said, a little break in the heavy of what we discuss here on a relatively weekly basis. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, and if you enjoyed hanging out and spending this time with me. Spread the love by sharing this video. Make sure your notification bell is turned on. I also want to say that this video and so much of what I do is sponsored by my members: Ghost Dragon CW, Wendy Williams, Nutslap, Val SWPA, KC, Blue Crossroads, Hurricane Holly, Gary Reed, Slow Motion, Life with Bobby, Jared Crazy Indian, Mama Cindy Lee, Chris Jarvis, Let the Monsters In with Ryan Tremblay, Kelly Lewis, Multifaceted Jules, The Batmom, Black Dragon, Diane Boss, Alexander Unverhall, Cheeky Kiki, Divine Empathic Tarot, Vixen Doe, Heather B, Aunt Edna, and Paranormal Pixie, in no particular order. Thank you so much. If you want to become a member, please, I am working on members' perks and benefits, as well as the changes that greatly benefit members in my Friday night live intuitive oracle stream. Information in the description box below. If you become a patron and pledge $20 a month or more, you will automatically receive a personal intuitive oracle reading from me each month. I'm getting a lot now, not of patrons, but like doing them for members, or just trying to keep up with the flow. So I might do like one every 3 months. I'm working it out. There's going to be a lot of changes. I also, if any of you know how I can do reaction videos, like easily and simply, because it is just me doing everything behind the scenes here at my channel. So to do something like reaction videos is something I really want to do. I think it'll do really well, but nobody seems to know how to do it, which is odd because I don't see it being that hard, but I don't know how to do it either, so I can't really say anything. Anyways, guys, check out the description box for more important links, ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, my Amazon wish list gift link. I also have the information for my spiritual helper boxes. Email me about information about that, video sessions, video intuitive oracle readings, personal general intuitive oracle readings, to send in your personal encounters with the supernatural, paranormal, extraterrestrial, otherworldly. I almost said paranormally. I don't know why. All of that, any correspondence, GemmaJadeParanormal at gmail.com. And if you're looking for a link to the Kindle, paperback, or Audible version of any of my 10 or 11 books, and it's not in the description box, you can go to Amazon and just type in Gemma Jade Books and you'll find my complete collection there. I'm working on Gone Mysterious Disappearances Volume 4 right now. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If nobody told you today, you're amazing. You are perfectly and perfectly made. You got this. I believe in you. I got your back. Always go in grace. Smile at a stranger. And I'll see you guys next time.